Thank you, Android Makers, and thank you everyone for joining me for this second day in Android Makers. Yesterday was a blast. Today is going to be the same, I hope. Before we get started, my name is Xavier Goucher. I'm staff engineer at Datadog. If you don't know Datadog, we're an observability platform allowing you to track logs, status, performance metrics across all your applications and organizations. And we do offer integrations for Android, of course, iOS, React Native, Flutter, and Kotlin multi-platform since this year. I've been an Android dev since 2009 and a geek since 1984. I'm old. And you might be wondering, why am I doing this talk, like about ethics and stuff? Because usually we want to have, coroutines or compose or AI, And it all started back in 2018. I was looking at the Stack Overflow survey, and for the younger ones here, Stack Overflow used to be the place where we copy-pasted our code from before ChatGPT and Copilot, right? So every year they did a survey where they asked developers around the world from demographics, like where do you live, or how old are you? Is it, are you developing for fun, or is it your job? They were asking questions about what's your favorite IDE and what's your least favorite language, and why is it JavaScript? And among the questions in 2018, they started to ask questions about ethics. And it was the first time they did it, and they haven't done it ever since. And those questions, really resonated with me. Like, for instance, the quick show of hands. If you were asked, like on Monday, you're back to work, and your manager asks you, can you please write some code for an ethical purpose? Would you do it? Like, show of hands, would you actually do it? A couple of hands here and there. Back in 2018, you had, 40% of people would either say, yeah, sure, whatever, or it depends on what it is. And it really, puzzled me, because ethical, unethical is a very strong word, right? Another question they asked was, if there was an ethical code in the code base, who should take the blame? Could it be the developers, the one writing the code and pushing the PR? Would it be the product manager who had the idea and wrote the Jira ticket, or would it be just the upper management? And 80% of the responders said, oh no, it's like either the one that had the idea or the management. I'm just the one typing, I'm just following orders. I'm not going to go further on this slide for now, because it's a bit early to get into the Godwin law argument, but it really puzzled me. Because, as software engineers, we have lots of power. We are special. You are special. On average, statistically speaking, we have lots of privileges: higher education, better income, better job stability, at least for a couple of years until AI takes a job. And we're mobile developers. Chances are, every person in this room has in their phone right now a piece of code that was written by someone else in the room. Right? I'm pretty sure all of you have something on your phone that's been written by me. So we have a lot of power. And you all know the saying, like, where there's great power, there's great responsibility, which, of course, is a quote by Winston Churchill when he was roaming New York in his red and blue outfit. Anyways, before we get started, I want to have a couple of definitions, because just want to make sure that we have, the same meaning behind the words we use. And the first word is ethics. It's in the title. And ethics is moral principles that governs a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. There's this word at the beginning, moral. So what does this mean? Let me just get it here. Should be there, yeah. Moral is concerned with right and wrong conduct or behavior. So essentially, ethical means being able to find what's right or wrong and choose the right decision, right path, the right thing to do. While I have the dictionary in hand, I just want to have one more word, just to food for thought. Extra-legal. It's sort of an action or a situation beyond the province of the law. And what does this mean? Well, if you have something that's legal, it means that somewhere in the law you have a line saying, hey, you're totally allowed to do that. Go ahead, have fun. And when something is illegal, you have somewhere in the law a line that says, oh no, you're totally forbidden to do that. Don't do that, or you're going to go to jail. You're going to have a fine, right? So extra legal is something that doesn't appear anywhere in the law at all. And software engineering usually falls in that category. We're often ahead of the law. Just think about it. The first ideas about AI, like software, computer AI, started in the 1940s. The first neural network that eventually became LLMs that we use today, the first neural network was coded in the 1960s. And yet, the first law about AI was voted in March 2024, just a year ago. It was the European AI Act. So for 60 to 80 years, there's been a whole gap in the law about what you could or couldn't do with AI. And it's the same with privacy. There was, it was like a no man's land before we had GDPR and CCPA and all the privacy laws and so on. So when you're a software engineer, more often than not, when you're doing something, the question is not about is it legal, but is it moral to do so? And that's a question that's very hard to answer because it's very subjective. Morals and ethics, it's like we all have kind of our own, and there's no silver bullet, no algorithm. There's no AI that you can talk to and prompt and say, hey, I have been asked to do this. Is it ethical? And it would give you an answer. There's no true or false answer, which, as a software engineer, I think is pretty frustrating. So, spoiler alert about this talk. I'm going to ask a lot of questions, but I'm not going to have an answer for a lot of them. I'm going to try to give you some tips and tricks to help you, but in the end, most of the answer to the question is ones that you're going to have to find yourself. So, let's get started with moral philosophy. As Chidi and Agoni said, we're going to have a long way to pull this off. It's going to take hours and hours of studying ethics and moral philosophy. I've talked with the Android makers, organizers. They agree with me. So all the talks of today have been canceled. It's just going to be me talking about morals and ethics for 8 hours. You're welcome. Anyways, there are lots of theories about ethics. And I know some people, I talked with them yesterday, that know much more about philosophy and ethics than I do. But just to give you a few pointers, the first few ones that you might know of is, first of all, consequentialism, which was thought of by Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century. And what it says is essentially that, well, the value, the moral of something lies in the consequences of it, right? So it's trying to know what's going to be the impact of an action, of a choice, to decide whether or not it's right or wrong. And the issue with that is that the consequences are very difficult to predict because, we can't predict the future. We don't know what the consequences are going to be like in 1 year, or 10 years, or 100 years. Another idea is the ontology by Immanuel Kant, who thought that acts were intrinsically right or wrong. Like, for instance, lying is always wrong, no matter what the context is, no matter what the consequences are. Lying is always going to be wrong. And that's one of the other end of the spectrum. And there's so many other different ideas in between. So which one is the right one? I don't know. There's no clear answer. And it's frustrating because philosophers, when they think about those, it's just thought experiments. They're just living in an abstract world. There's never been a philosopher that had written paper and say, yeah, should I use React Native or Flutter for my app? They don't care about the concrete stuff. Just living in a thought experiment. And even if you could choose one, you could say, okay, I'm going to follow this ethical paradigm. You're still screwed because you can't trust your instinct. You can't trust your brain. We have something that is called cognitive biases. And we all have them, like you, me, everybody. And cognitive biases essentially are the shortcuts that your brain takes when making a decision. Because the brain is a very fancy piece of engineering. You have, it's very lazy. It's trying to save CPU and memory and network. And so it's facing, when you have to make a decision, instead of going through all the computation to make sure that you have the right one, the right answer, it's just going to take a shortcut to say, oh yeah, I think it's going to be this one. And 60% of the time, it works all of the time. But not always. And cognitive biases, like you have hundreds of them. There's a link at the end to learn more about them. But you might know about, for instance, the confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when you look at the news, you only look at the articles that confirms your own belief. Or you have the halo effect. The halo effect is when you transfer one, the feeling you have from someone's traits into some other thing that they do. Like, for instance, seeing someone in fancy clothes on the main stage of a world-famous conference, you may think every word that they say is going to be true, right? Right? Thank you. So it's frightening, and there's going to be even a few more horror stories just to know what it could lead to. The first one is the 2015 Volkswagen scandal. I don't know if you remember this, but back then Volkswagen was making a new car, diesel engine, and one of the things that comes out of a diesel engine is nitrogen oxide. It's a molecule that most scientists would describe as bad. Right? It can cause, acid rains. It can cause asthma. It can cause, lots of different kinds of pollutions. And so there are laws around the world to say, okay, you're only allowed to emit that many per liter of exhaust fumes. And Volkswagen, they were doing the thing, and they had a very cheap filter at the end of the diesel engine. And when doing their tests internally, they were realizing that the nitrogen oxide level were through the roof. And so they took off the cheap engine and they took a more expensive one, and no, they didn't. They actually changed the software of the car. If the car detects that it's being running in a test to verify the nitrogen oxide, it would go into a low emission mode and it would pass a test. And then when the car knows that you're on the open road and driving and having fun, it would go into full pollution, full emission mode, and the nitrogen oxide level would go through the roof. And so they got caught, of course. And it's not the only company that did it. A lot of other manufacturers would do it. It's just that Volkswagen was in the spotlight for this, which sprung a lot of those GitHub repositories, where essentially it's just a piece of code that detects whether or not you're in CI. And if you're in CI, all your unit tests are going to go green. On your laptop, the test could fail, but in the CI, they would go green, and you're sure that your PR is going to be approved. I shouldn't have to say this. Don't use those. Those are just for the joke, right? Anyways, that's one of the examples. Another one much closer to us on what could go wrong is with AI. This is an example. I did it just a couple of weeks ago, and you can try it in Midjourney, DALL-E, or whatever AI you like to generate images. And you say, okay, I want a wristwatch that's going to go 5:30. And as you can see, it's not at 5:30. It's showing 10:10. And some of you must already know why. Because since 1926, most watch manufacturers, almost all of them nowadays, are showing pictures. When in the ads, in the catalogs, in luxury pictures, they're always going to show the watches with the hands showing 10:10. And the reason why is because it's more pleasing, the angle is symmetrical, and it's framing perfectly the logo on the watch face. But the thing is that this shows that AI is very, very linked with what's being used to train it. And because there's only pictures of watches with the hands showing 10:10, AI can only make a watch that's showing 10:10 and cannot do anything else. It doesn't understand what the hands are. It doesn't understand what the time is. It just knows that those pixels statistically are the one that matches most closely the prompt that I gave. And sure, it's a fun, quirky example. But the same principle of having some bias in the training data set can go much more wrong. For instance, this is something that was done with ChatGPT a year ago. And you ask it, show me the CEO of a successful company. Or show me a successful investor. Or show me a secretary. I hope I don't have to explain why there is a bias and why this bias is wrong. If you have questions about it, come see me after the talk. We're going to have a moment together. But this goes to show that all actions, all choices can have consequences, right? And the last thing that I have, last horror story, is just a couple of months old from Instagram, where I think it was in January I tested this on my phone because I couldn't believe it. Where you are in Instagram searching for the hashtag Democrats, you could get this screen that says, oh, no, I'm sorry, we're just blocking all of those because it contains sensitive content. But if you would search for hashtag Republicans, you'd get like hundreds of thousands of results, posts and reels, everything, essentially. And maybe you could give them benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's been automatically blacklisted because so many people flagged those contents as sensitive. But I'm pretty convinced that someone had to write a PR that says, oh, I'm going to add this to the banned keywords. And no matter what your political side is, you can agree that it's not really the right thing to do. And one might just say, okay, let's just hope that we're not going to go into this situation. I'm not going to be the one doing this PR. So how can we do it? How can we be ethical? Well, there's a lot of things that you can ask yourself. And the first thing is, how can you be ethical regarding your users? And this one has a very, very simple answer. Please, excuse my French, you need to care about your users, right? Just, actually think about them, not just, doing the features, not doing the things, but actually care about the feature, the users. And to do that, you can ask yourself a bunch of questions. For instance, if the users were in the meeting room right now, while you're talking about them, about the product, about the app, about the pricing, about the ads, about whatever, would they still be happy about it? And would you make the same decision, right? This is also the question of who your users are. Are they your clients? Meaning, are your users the ones that pay you, or are you paid by someone else? Because that shifts a lot of things. Like if you're paid by someone that's not the one using your application, then you can have kind of conflict of interest. You want to make the people paying you happy. So you might take decisions that are going to make the users less happy. What's the impact on your user's life? On their, are you going to trigger doom scrolling, or are you going to, prevent them from being able to have the life, to work, to do whatever? Are you going to have an impact on the device, on the network that they're paying for, on the battery, on the device lifespan? One tip that you can have to try to care more about users is to give them a name. So, because you don't know, of course, the name of all of your users, but you can say, okay, I'm going to give names to different personas. So the anonymous user of my app, not logged in, is going to be Alice, and the logged in user that's just on a freemium account is going to be Bob, and the one that has the premium full paid account is going to be Charlie. And give them names, not just like this, but just in the way you talk about the users and in the Jira tickets where you say, oh, as a user, I need to know. As Alice, I want to be able to do something. As Bob, I want to be able to do something. Giving them names, make them real, make them more concrete, make them more feel like people in your mind, and you're going to care more about them automatically. And then you can try to be thinking about the product, the product you're going to make. There is one quote that I really like. It's in Jurassic Park. It's Ian Malcolm saying it. And in the book, it goes like this. Scientists are actually preoccupied with accomplishment. So they're focused on whether they can do something. They never stop to ask if they should do something. And this is something that I found myself doing a lot. Like you're, in a meeting and we started talking about, the next quarter, and someone is going to say, oh yeah, we need to do this thing. And automatically, as an engineer, my brain goes into, okay, what's going to be the algorithm behind it? maybe I'm going to use this library I heard about, and oh, maybe we could use this best practice that I heard of in the last Android makers, and so on. And so you're going to start, your brain is going to try to solve the problem and say, I want to be able to do it, to crack the puzzle, being able to write the algorithm, the code that's going to do it. And very rarely do we stop and say, oh, wait a minute. You want to do what in the app? So there's a question that you want to know is that you want to focus on what the product is actually about. Usually a product is about solving a problem, right? So does the feature make sense? Does the product solve the problem that you want to solve, right? And there's more questions that you can ask yourself, like is the UI and UX relevant? And is it accessible? Is the feature usable smoothly? There's one thing that a discussion that I had with many people, and it always went the same way. People that don't work in, software engineering, that had, various jobs, most of them not very tech savvy, and they all had a specific piece of software dedicated to the field that they were working in, right? Just an example, I was talking with my car mechanic, and this discussion happened several times with him, and he has this software that's used by a lot of garages in France, where you can, order the parts and book appointments and have the car history and all of that, and everything that you need, and run invoice, everything you need to do when you're running a garage. And when he's using it and trying to do something, usually for my car, because that's the only time I'm in his office, he would always complain about the software. It was like, no car mechanic would ever think about doing things this way. Like, I want to do this, and I have to go in this menu and pop things up and go and click on this, and it doesn't make any sense for me. And I had the same discussion with other people in other fields. Like, it doesn't make sense for someone working in this job to have to do it this way. And the reason why is that the people writing the software and designing the software, they're mostly used to, Figma or, Android Studio or other IDEs and softwares that's used for design and software engineering. They're not thinking like the target audience is, meaning that even though it does work, it doesn't make any sense. So you want to be able to, gather feedbacks from the actual users. What's the frustration points? What are the things that don't make sense for them? And so you need to have to talk with them to understand it. So one other tip on this, on the product, is that you're allowed to say no. This is a bit of an horror story. A friend of mine, so it actually happened to a friend of mine, he was working in the bank industry a few years back, and one of the bank was, doing a refresh of the web page, and among other things, adding the pop-up for the cookies. You all know the one. And someone had the brilliant idea to say, hey, people usually they just click yes, okay, give me the cookies, let me go to the content I want. What if we added a checkbox that's already checked that says they want to have a new insurance plan that's €5 more a month? And no one is going to look at it because everyone's sitting at the bottom, yeah, it's the cookies, let's go ahead. And my friend just said, no, I'm not going to do that. And the answer was, yeah, well, do it. If you don't, someone else will. I was like, yeah, well, sure. Well, let someone else do it, but I'm not going to do it. And he was making so much noise and so much fuss about this thing that it got dropped eventually. So you're allowed to say no. It can be complicated. It can be difficult because we all have families and lives, and sometimes you don't want to lose your job, but sometimes there are hills that you want to be able to die on. And there's a question of how you're going to code those features as well. So you want to be ethical regarding the code base. And there's another book that I want to quote there. It's All Are Wrong Todays by Ellen Mastai. I wrote it a few years back. And the quote I really like is, when you invent a new technology, you also invent the accident of that technology. When you invent the car, you also invent the car accident. And so in the book, it's a scientist that invents an amazing invention that could change human life for the better. And when he invents it, he keeps it in his lab and doesn't tell anyone, because he knows that with this invention, there's going to be an accident of that invention. And so before releasing his findings and sharing his invention with the world, he says, okay, I first want to be able to know what the accident might be and how I can prevent it so that I can release the thing safely into the world. The same thing goes with your code. You can ask yourself, how can the code be misused? How can it be hacked, right? And there's a question that sometimes in some companies you spend a lot of time thinking about, but in others, just do the feature and fire and forget. Also, there are other questions that might sound more familiar, like should we ship a minimum viable product, or should we try to fix all of the bugs, or most of it? And if we just solve some of the bugs, which one, and which one do we fix first? And those questions often in meetings are answered very fast without pondering about it. But sometimes it's nice to take a step back and think about, okay, what's going to be the consequences if we don't fix this bug right now? What's going to be impact? How many customers are going to be impacted by this one? And should we fix it earlier? Again, I don't have the answers to that. It's each team, each company is going to have their own answers to this one. It also goes to which tech stack and CI should we use? Is our PR approval strategy enough? Are the tests that we're having strong enough? All those questions about the code, essentially, you can, rewatch all of the talks that we had yesterday and watch all the talks that we're going to have today, because they're going to help you, come up with your own answers and try to move the code into a better place. The short version of this is that you want to take ownership of the whole code base. Not just the files that you're asked to write and edit, but the whole thing. Because when you're a team working on a project, the whole team wants to make the whole project better, right? So it's not just about the file that you're owner of, but it's the whole code base. And you can try to use a scouting rule, right? Which is to always leave the code base better than you found it. So when you're fixing a bug in a file, you can say, okay, I fixed the bug, we didn't think about the null case, or we didn't think about this case. Take a look around, in the methods above and below, and look at the class file and say, okay, is there a way for me to make this class a little bit cleaner? Is there something that's a bit obsolete or that's not maintainable that I can, arrange? Can I make the test better around this use case? Always try to think, how can I make the file better, even if it's not part of the current ticket you're working on? And then, of course, I couldn't miss it. You want to be ethical regarding AI. The short answer is, don't trust it blindly, right? We saw some example earlier, and as Sarah Jung said, she's a journalist at The Verge, we know already that all the machine learning has huge potential. Data sets with ingrained biases will produce biased results. Garbage in, garbage out. We saw the issue with the CEO and secretary. We saw the issue with the watch. And the same goes with whatever AI you're using, right? So the question you can ask yourself is there a bias in the training data set? How was the training data set curated? Who decided to choose those examples to train the AI? Because the thing is that if the examples were chosen by a human or several humans, they all have cognitive biases. They all have their own, ideas and prejudices that can bleed into the training data set. So, and if it's in the training data set, it is going to be in the output of the AI, of course. But there are also the question of, was the training data set obtained legally, right? Does it infringe any intellectual property or copyright? Because we've heard a lot of artists complaining about this, about DALL-E and Midjourney being trained on their artwork without them being even asked about it or credited for it or retributed for it. And it's been proven that a lot of copyrighted content, textual content, was also used to train some of ChatGPT and other AIs, and same for music and same for video. So that's the question, how was the training data set obtained, and does it, steal something from someone else? Also, what was a metric that was used to define success in reinforcement training? So reinforcement training is, instead of saying, this is the example that I want you to make, you just say, okay, do something, and I'm going to give you a grade. So the AI is going to produce an output, and you're going to say, oh, yeah, this is very good, A+. Or it's going to do something very bad, and you say, oh, no, this is an F, minus. And so, again, the person that's grading the output of the AI can have cognitive biases. But maybe, in some cases, the AI, the metric to define the success, is given by an AI. So how that AI was trained is also a question. And if that AI was trained using another AI, like how that, it goes on and on and on, of course. Also, there's a question of whether or not AI replaces human creativity. By the way, if you're interested about creativity, especially in software engineering, I gave a talk last year here with my guitar. You can find the YouTube link in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And who owns the AI output, right? Even without the training dataset copyright issue, does the output belongs to the person that created and trained the AI, or does it belong to the one that wrote the prompt? Or is it shared? Who knows? In the US, the patent law says that if the patent was written by an AI, you can't patent it. You have to prove that at least 50% of it was created by a human being. And I'm really not sure how you can prove that something's been written by an actual human being, except by recording them, doing the work. Who knows? So one of the tips that I have regarding AI is to put people first and last. Put people first is that you want to make sure that using AI is not going to put someone's job in jeopardy, right? You don't want to say, oh, we're going to have this AI, and so now you're out of a job. Goodbye. And people last is that, as we saw, the output of an AI is not guaranteed to be correct. Like, most of the time, the output is going to be 90% or 95% correct. But that means that there's still going to be a margin for error. So you want to be sure that you have a human being that looks at the output and say, OK, this is wrong. Just to give you an example, on a repository, open source repository, not so long ago, I was seeing someone making a pull request. And in one of the files that was changed, they added something that, it's not exactly that, but essentially it was going along the way of if x equals true, then return true, else return false. And that person was not a junior. They had decades of experience in software engineering. And I was like, how did they actually write this and not see that this was wrong? So I made a comment. And the answer came back and, oh, yeah, sorry, this was written by Copilot. I didn't see that it wrote it. I'm going to rewrite it. You need to actually watch what Copilot or whatever is doing, because it's not Copilot's name that's going to be on the pull request in the commit. It's going to be yours. So you want to make sure that you agree with whatever it wrote. So now I want to talk about code of conduct. Well, first we're going to take a first detour, because most of us, I think there's only 8 countries in the world that didn't sign this yet. Most of us are coming from countries that signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. And so, if you've never read it, just take a look. It's very interesting. But there's the actual 12 that I really like, which was, where is it? It's over there somewhere. Article 12, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, yada, yada, yada. This was written in 1948, half a century before GDPR and all the other privacy laws. But still, it was already there, And so there's a question here about correspondence, which also should be part of GDPR, but there's a question of if your app has some messaging content in it, so a messaging feature, of course, all the messaging app where the main purpose is messaging. They're going to have end-to-end encryption and all that to make sure that no one can look at your correspondence. But if your app is, let's say, a dating app, or it's a I don't know, a neighbor sharing stuff app where you have messaging in itself, are the content of the messages in clear text? Can someone working for a company actually know what some two users are talking about? That's still an interesting question. Anyway, code of conduct. In lots of other fields, there are clear code of conduct. There are oaths that everyone in this field must abide to. Like in medicine, you have the Hippocratic Oath. And even apart from that, you have lots of approvals to get a drug in the market. In journalism, you have the Munich Charter, you have stuff for architecture and aviation, and maybe a lot of other fields that I don't know about. In software engineering, there is no clear code of conduct or oath that's used and respected by everyone. I'm pretty sure that none of you, when you graduated, had to take an oath and say, yeah, I'm going to do this. Or if you did, come and talk with me, because really interested about this. But there's been a lot of things that have been written along those lines. The first one was the IEEE and ACM Code of Ethics. It was from the 90s. Part of it is kind of dated, but some of it is really relevant still now. I really wish they would do an update, though. But there's been a lot of other people thinking about this, about having an oath, about trying to have a code of conduct, a code of ethics in software engineering, because, again, with great power comes great responsibilities. So I won't dig into all of those, because we won't have the time, but you're going to have the links in the slides, and I really encourage you to go and read them, and make up your own mind. Right now, it's not, really strict. The code is more what you call guidelines more than actual rules. So try to find out which rules really resonate with you and which one do you want to follow in your work, and stick to it. I'm reaching to the conclusion now. First, you want to get into an ethical mindset and to try to think about what you're doing when you're doing it at work. I mean, outside of work too, but right now we're focused on the code. But there are a few tips here I can give you as well. The first one is the primum non nocere, which is Latin for first do no harm, which essentially is, a lot of people think it's part of the Hippocratic Oath. It's not. It's actually, it appears in a couple of writings by Hippocrates. And essentially, it's kind of the first law of robotic by Asimov. A robot shall not bring harm to human, or leave harm come to human through inaction. And I feel like this is a good rule to have as a software engineer. Don't write code that's gonna, hurt another human being, or don't write code, or if you can write code that's gonna prevent a human being from being harmed, try to do it. Try to not bring harm to other people. Essentially, don't be a jerk, right? Then there is the see something, say something rule. And this one is that when you see something in the code base, in the tickets, even if it's a ticket or a feature that's going to be done in another part of the app that's not yours, you can still say something and say, hey, are we sure we're going to do that? Are we sure we want that in the app? Be okay and be open to ask the difficult questions. It can be difficult, especially if you are new in the company or if you're younger, but ask the questions. Say, are we sure we want to do that? Ask the difficult ones where you know that it's going to probably make a fuss. Because in the end, you want to be proud of what you do. Then there are a couple of links. Deceptive designs essentially is a lot of UI and UX designs that are made to trick people into doing something that they don't want to do. For instance, you have, when you're signing into a website, you have the checkbox that reads, do not uncheck this if you do not want to not receive the newsletter every week. And so you never know if you will have to check it or uncheck it, and it's a bit bizarre. And so there are lots of deceptive designs and things that are made to trick people. So go and take a look, spend half an hour, go on the website and see if maybe some of them appear in your own applications. Another thing I mentioned, cognitive biases earlier. There is a link where you can read a lot about them. There's hundreds of those. So again, very interesting, but it's a rabbit hole. You can spend hours on this. Then for having an ethical mindset, more specifically into what we're doing, there's all the tips that I already gave. Care about your users, focus on what the product's about, take ownership of the whole code base, and don't trust AI blindly. Finally, if you want to go further, like if I didn't have enough questions in the talk, here are a few more. Like, did you read the open source license of the libraries that you're using? Do you know what they mean and what your obligations are regarding to those libraries, right? Do you credit the open source code that you're using in your app? Do you credit the code snippets that you copied from Stack Overflow? Or do you credit GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT or Tab9 or whatever AI is writing code for you? Also, what's your code or app carbon footprint? Again, there was an amazing talk last year by Fanny Emmanuel about the ecological impact of our work. So, link in the description, like and subscribe, you know the deal. Finally, let's go back to this one. If there is unethical code in the code base, who's to blame? I think it's time to cross that line. I want to remind you of the word of Marian Edelman, who said, "Never let us confuse what is legal with what is right. Everything Hitler did in Nazi Germany was legal, but it was not right." So, thanks a lot, everyone, for listening. You have the links to the slides in the QR code, and thank you. I don't know if we have time for a couple of questions, but yeah, go ahead, and if not, I'll be around all day, so feel free to come and ping me.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I have a question. Do you want to share the most unethical piece of code that you wrote?
The most unethical piece of code that I wrote, that's a very interesting question. I'm working for Datadog, so we're doing observability, so some might think it a bit unethical. I can actually share one piece of code that I was adamant that we kept. So essentially, in Android, you have a way to detect whether or not the phone is in battery saver mode. So the user say, "Oh yeah, I want to save my battery. I won't be plugged in for some time, so I want to save it." And when we detect this in our SDK, we stopped all network because we know that network is a large responsible for consuming the battery. And some customers noticed that, and they were like, "Yes, but if you do that, I don't get the observability data instantly. I have to wait until the person uncheck the battery saver and actually send the information." And I was always in those discussions ready to die on the hill and say, "No, this stays. We want to respect the will of what the user wants to do with their own device." And our SDK is open sourced, so our customers, and I know some of them did, but some customers can decide to say, "Okay, I'm going to remove this check to be able to send the things no matter what." But I always refuse to have even an option to do it in our code. And I think also that thing that I did, I can't think of something right now. I'll think about it, but yeah. Any other question?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. I didn't have any thought about that before. So currently I'm working with an ad network, and currently the business model of the internet is basically ads. So what about the ethical behaviors in the ad world, ad tech world, especially when we see, for example, for applications that are targeted to children, like games with ads that are difficult, because I see my son use the iPad with some game, and sometimes he can't, for example, close an ad because he can't find the closing button.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's also there is some lack of ethics in the part of the ad tech, the advertisers, because they think about the money, and and also there is also a new trend that are games in in the ads itself. So it's catastrophic for games destined to childs. So what do you think about that? And is there a way to avoid that? For example, is there some solution? For example, I don't know, an application or even a VPN that can. Because I'm working with a network. It's our business model to have.
Yeah.
We try to be ethical. We try to in our company. We try to we use an IDLS framework. We don't get IDs. We can't. But we work with other partners, so we can't always predict what type of ads that we have. But yeah. Is there any solution about that to avoid those kind of things, especially for devices with children that are used by children?
So I'm not sure if you can detect if a device or the Google account on the device is a kid account, or if it has parental restrictions on it. I'm pretty sure there's a way to do it, but I've never done it, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. I think, so first of all, go take a look at the deceptive design, because the X that you can't click on it because it's so tiny and you have to click perfectly on it, and otherwise it brings you to the Play Store, is so annoying. I do think that right now ads, I'm not targeting yours specifically, I just know my experience with ads, see that most of the ones that are annoying are the lazy ones. It's like, okay, you're just popping a new activity and putting the thing in full screen, and just having the countdown and then popping the things, and you change them. It works. I mean, it works. Yes, you're sure that the person is gonna watch the ads, and you're even if you didn't have the difficult to close button. It would still be annoying, because, yeah, I know those videos where you're thinking that the game is about something, and then it's actually just another Bejeweled clone, which is so annoying. I think that there is a balance to have in ads. Like, for instance, some ads that are integrated more in the UI, the look and feel and the experience of the application that it's using. And actually, I think part of it can come from the ad provider and the ad network themselves, then trying to say, hey, these are best practices that you could use. And so there could be some design and research to say, how can we still have ad and still have revenue? Because, of course, you want to have money to pay for your engineers. But having some best practices, say, this is how we might want to do it. But also, it's the people that have the ad and say, okay, I'm going to try to blend the ad in some parts that don't impact the way things. Like, for instance, I was playing Gardic the other day, where you have several people joining a room, and you have a waiting screen until everyone is ready and everyone has chosen their name, and you can have an ad in there because you're waiting for other people to join. So you put an ad in there, it's going to be there for the duration of the waiting room, and when the game starts, you remove the ad and enjoy the thing. And so it's not blocking things. Then you can have things like that, trying to be there but discreet, I'm going to say. I don't have solution because I'm not working on those. But yeah, this is a very interesting topic. So yeah, kudos thank you for asking the question. I think we're out of time now. It's time for a coffee break. I'm going to be there in a few minutes, so happy to have you come and ask me other questions if you want. And enjoy your day.